What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 6th episode of the Each One Reach One podcast. My name is Luke, and today our special guest is Pastor Derrick. How are you doing, brother?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on here.
Yeah, no, thank you for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Yep.
And so, the whole premise of the Each One Reach One podcast is we want to talk about, people's story and how they were reached. And so, if you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself and just kind of, your testimony and how you were reached.
Yeah, I would say the way I was reached is like pretty different in some ways. I would say the first seeds of being reached by God is what I'm assuming, right? Is my dad was actually in recovery and he used to take me to AA meetings with him. And so my dad got busted with drug possession and was going to do like some major time. Like he had like pounds of coke in the back of his trunk. And so he was scheduled to do 90 meetings in 90 days. Wow. And I had no mom. And so he had to go to 90 meetings in 90 days. And from the age of like 5 until like, I want to say junior high, I had to go with my dad everywhere because, you're like single kid, single parent. Mm-hmm. And so I was hearing this conversation of a higher power. And all these people in recovery are always talking about this need to have a higher power and to search, and they're so broken. And when you go into these meetings, you'll hear a lot of stories of people being like, I had a whole family, I blew it all up because I decided to use alcohol or drugs. And I'm like, I'm like 6 or 7 playing in there. But when you're like, 10, 11, 12, all of a sudden, some of that stuff starts sinking into your soul. Yeah, you
start thinking about it more, right?
And, I wouldn't say I'm like, I was kind of like the bro, So, like, I don't know if I thought about it, but I'm more like, I was like, I felt about it more, So, like, you get a certain feeling, You're like, that feels good, And you're like, you don't know, And so my dad got married to his wife, his ex-wife, and we had to stay at my dad's friend's house. And they said, hey, on Sunday mornings, we go to church. And I'm like, what's church? Wow. Like I didn't understand this concept. And I still kind of, when I go to church world, I still kind of look at the world like this a little bit. My dad grew up in Berkeley. He grew up in a really like Catholic-based faith, but like kind of didn't put us a lot around that or anything, And so we go to church, and I mean, the first day they said, hey, I go to church in town. It was a good time at Clovis Hills, and the youth pastor there, his name was Dave McNeil. He goes, hey, we're going to an outreach this week. Would you like to come? And I'm like, what's an outreach? Wow. Right? Like, I'm like, what are you talking about? Yeah. He's like, oh, these people are going to be breaking bricks and tearing phone books in half. And it's kind of embarrassing now to say that I got saved at like a power team event, but like literally they're like, and it's like the broish way to get saved, right? They're breaking like baseball bats over their knees, and they're like ripping phone books. And so the guy, I remember to this day, is at Cornerstone, and the guy that gives his testimony, he talks about his grandpa and how his grandpa was his hero. Well, my papa was my hero, right? My grandpa was did everything to me, and he passed away when I was 12, and so I'm like maybe 13 or 14, and he's talking about his love for his grandpa and how he connected that love from his grandpa to the love of the Lord. Wow. And I was just like broken there. But the reality of it is I probably did what most youth do, and I had like a very emotional experience and encounter with the Lord that I would say is real, but it didn't really stick probably until I was in my 20s, in my early 20s. But yeah, and so I accepted the Lord from there. The really cool part, I have a couple really amazing things that happen. I'm dyslexic, right? I was going to school, and during that time too as well, I had a teacher, and she had busted me doing some bad stuff. And she's like, well, I won't tell your dad, because my dad's like machismo, Mexican dad.
He's gonna get you in trouble.
Oh, dude, no, he's not he's gonna beat me. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm gonna die. I'm like,
don't call my dad,
like,
please.
if you call my dad, I'm just running away. Like, I will go to Mexico instead of going to America. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm running there to be safe. And so she goes, okay, Derrick, well, I'm in high school and her name was Sandra. She goes, Derrick, we're gonna get real serious about your education because you need to. And I said, okay. And this is all around the same time. Like, this is what's happened in Derrick's world, right?
Wow.
I come from a broken family. We don't really know who God is except for the God of your own understanding type of idea. And then I have this encounter with the God, and I take it serious, but not too serious, because I don't know what to do. Like, I just said yes to the Lord. What do you do next?
Yeah.
Or I get baptized. Okay, like, what is it? And, and I don't pay attention very well, so I was like, all right, I got baptized. That feels good. Girl in the second row, I hope you like me more now. So, but then this lady, she ends up saying, Derrick, like, I need you to take school serious, because at that time I was a freshman in high school and I could only read Curious George books. So, like, she goes, your whole entire high school career, we're going to read this Bible.
Wow.
And she's like, you're not going to tell anybody about it. We're going to work on it. And I mean, I went from, like, reading the Bible, like, sounding out Genesis and to, like, functionally reading all the way to Revelations.
Wow.
And didn't believe it would happen. And I mean, she would pound into me. She pounded into me from, like, day one. Like, she made me memorize 1 John 4:19. We love because he first loved us. And she would kind of preach this idea of every real act of love in life comes from this God. And it was really cool because not having a mom there, really, having a stepmom or other moms that my dad would date and then they become mom, what would end up happening is God would use her to communicate more about God to me in such a strong way. The real hard part about this, though, and the real victory, too, is so my senior year comes around and she goes, hey, I think I want to do this, like, mission trip thing. I've never heard of it before. You're supposed to spread, like, the word of God and serve with little kids. And my youth group's going to Romania. So she actually helped pay for me to go to Romania. And my dad and stepmom, we all, like, fundraised the whole thing. Well, I come back after that summer and I'm telling her, like, she's like, hey, I want to talk to you about how everything went. And we're sitting down one day and she goes, hey, I just got to let you know, like, stuff's going to look different for us. And I said, so how come? And she's like, well, I actually have stage 4 cancer, and they're saying I'm probably not going to make it through this. And then she would go, I could see it in my head to this day. She would look at me, and she was like maybe 90 pounds.
Wow.
And she'd look at me, and she grabs my hand, and she goes, Derrick, we love because he first loved us, and I will be fully engulfed in his love. And I had no idea what she was talking about. Right? Like, the mind of a 17 or 18-year-old, you're just like, I'm never going to see you again. And it was kind of crazy because I think that was the first time where faith and eternity became actual reality to me.
Wow.
Right? Like, you switch that point over.
Yeah.
And you go, I'm completely human.
Yeah.
And right now, as she walks through it, in March, she passes away at the end of March of my senior year. And I'm not really sure how I graduated. Like, I had like a 1.99, or something like that. I think the teacher just like
2.02.
I was like doing really, really good actually that year. And we actually, in the hospital, we finished reading Revelations together.
Wow.
She was in the hospital. I thought, like, it wasn't going to go well. Or I thought she was going to get better, actually. And I was still, like, hopeful. I was kind of more naive to what was going to actually happen. And we finished reading Revelations together in the hospital. And it was a very defining moment for me in a destructive life.
Wow.
And then after that, I don't know. You want me to keep going?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, and then after that, the great part is I get out of high school. I have a high school sweetheart. She's on the worship team. She's a popular girl. I'm like hanging out with all the cool guys. We're doing life really well. And then we fall into sin, right? And we end up giving into it. and it just like slowly destroys us and breaks us up. And I think we were together for like 2 or 3 years, and then after that, that was really what I used to allow myself to walk away from Christ. And then my dad ends up getting a divorce from my former stepmom and dating someone new, and the whole world just looks different within a year. You know, my stepsister like kind of takes off, and it was just a whole reality shift on top of some hurt. You know, like you're kind of hurting over losing somebody, kind of trying to get closer to God, and then I did what my dad did, and the only way that I could figure out how to feel better was to go to a bottle and drink and work out and try to make myself look good. And back in the day, Jersey Shore was really popular, so I looked like Jersey Shore half the time. It was embarrassing, right? And then I would say probably like 2 years into that, I ended up having another girlfriend, and we break up, and I'm doing pretty well in life financially, and just lose everything because I just drink it all away. And there's a lot more that goes into that time, but I ended up moving in with a childhood friend and her family, and it was crazy. I was getting high at nighttime, and my buddy, I met up with him. I was going to work to build up to do a bodybuilding competition. You can't tell now. Daughters, you know, wife, comfort food, you know. Now instead of drinking, I emotionally take care of my life, you know. I emotionally eat. So what ends up happening is he goes, hey, for 40 days, if you want to hit this competition the right way, we need to like get sober. And I'm like, yeah, let's do it, right? Because I'm like so broed out at those. Yeah, that'll be easy. I didn't understand what like detox was until like it's like 4 or 5 days later, and I'm like sweating and disgusting and feeling like gross. But I had these dreams about going to this church, and I'd never seen this church before.
Wow.
And I was like, man, there's no way that this church is real. So it's a Sunday morning, and I drive to where in my dream I see this church at.
Wow.
Right. This is how you know you're a little loaded still, right? Like, and so I drive, and the church is there.
Wow.
And service starts in like 20 minutes. And I'm looking at people walking in the church, and I'm like, this is not real. So I get high in the parking lot. Wow. I'm like, I'm going to get high in the parking lot. I'm going to go in this church and see if this is real, right? Because if it is real, I need to be high to be able to experience this, because there's no way your dreams are coming to reality. So I walk in the church. This really, really cool guy, he's not a pastor anymore. He's a real estate agent now. He's awesome. His name's Rick Rios. He walks up to me. The head pastor first walks up to me, and I was like, dude, I'm good. Played the church game before. I just need some space, right? And this guy, Rick Rios, dude got swagger, right? Just swagger for days. So I'm already respecting him as he's walking up to me. He's jacked too. So I'm like, yeah.
Got some pep in his step walking up.
So he walks up to me. He goes, hey, and I grew up in like Clovis Hills, a Southern Baptist church, very conservative spiritually, very biblical driven, love them, right? I'd never been to a church. It was a vineyard style church. And he walks up to me and he goes, Derrick, you walked in here today, and I have never had this happen to me before. But you've walked in here, and Satan is saying that you're all these things, that you're a liar, that you're a cheater, that you're not worthy. And he goes, I'm just telling you right now, Jesus is walking up to you right now, and he's just slowly peeling one off. And he's replacing it with, you're worthy, you're loved.
Wow.
And I mean, I can tell you, I went stone sober. Like, I was like just freaking out. And I was like, this isn't real. Right? And I just kept going back. And it was really cool. A couple nights later, I had a dream of a girl with curly hair, and I was holding her. And I don't know what it was, but I was like, I thought it was a girl I knew, so I was talking to this girl. I was like, how you doing? You know, like just something it ended up actually being my future wife.
Wow.
And so I met my future wife there, and it was really wild. I went to college group there. I was like maybe like 22 or 23, and she's 19. And she's a homeschool girl, never held a guy's hand, been in love with the Lord since she like could walk, you know?
Wow.
And she was sitting there one day, and my buddy Mike and I were trying to stay sober, and we're talking in the group about this, and we're like, this sucks. Like, this life is a little bit harder than we thought.
Mm.
And she was like, and so for all you youth students here, this does not happen very often, so don't be telling Marcus next week, God told me this, because it's a lie, all right? But she walks up to, she's at college group, and she said she felt the presence of the Lord tell her that's your husband.
Wow.
And I'm like, I'm damaged goods, right? Like you still got the wrapping on you. You're looking, you're fine. You're like, you need to have like a wholesome dude, And then 3 or 4 months later, she ends up becoming a missionary and leaving to India, and like ripped my heart out. And I was like dating her. We were like starting to subtly date, and then what really calls me to ministry though is Aubrey and I end up getting married in India. We ended up doing some mission work there, and it was just a fantastic time. She kind of had a hard time with some older missionaries there that were probably burnt out. But we had a good time, kind of rebounded and came back. And then the friends that I've had, and here's where ministry really kicks off for me and where I really start feeling called. I'm sober for about a year. Aubrey and I are married for about almost a year. And my best friend calls me up, and his girlfriend had an abortion.
Wow.
And I mean, best friend, I'm talking like we were in special ed classes together. Dude was yacked. Like, he was always working out, worked at GB3, like, loved the Lord. And he started drinking a lot. And he goes, Derrick, I know that you got sober. And he's actually the kind of the one that called me out and helped me get sober. He goes, hey, can you help me go to a meeting or something? Like, I'm in a bad place. Wow. And we kind of known it, but like he wasn't straight out saying it yet.
Yeah.
So we drive to the meeting, get out of the meeting, and we're going over to my friend's shop. He's on his motorcycle, and he hits a curb and flies off, and hits a stop sign with his body. Wow. And I run up and do CPR on him, and he doesn't live. And I mean, I do CPR on him for like, I mean, it was probably like 10 minutes, but like, a paramedic comes up out of nowhere and does CPR on him. And so like, all my friends I've had like 4 or 5 friends in my whole life that are just amazing humans. And we've been like brothers, right? And we're all just devastated. And his parents have a candlelight gets like made for him, and there's just a ton of people there. Wow. And his parents asked me to give the gospel message as candlelight. And so I give the gospel message candlelight, and like all these people say yes to Jesus. Wow. I'm talking like, these are like the party kids of party kids. Like we're like, I'm barely sober, right? Like, who am I? I'm barely sober, barely functional, with like a Christian wife that's like, you can do whatever. And I'm like, I just threw this out there. And I hadn't given the gospel message since I was like a missionary in high school. You know what I mean? So I'm like, I could barely even spell gospel message, Wow. And people just come to the Lord, and we just, my buddies are like, dude, I think we should start a church plant. And we started a church plant. I thought it was going to be my buddy's brother that was going to do it, because he was like the most God-loving guy out of all of us. So we're all talking about it, and they're like, we want you to preach the first message. And literally from there, it just kind of ignited passion and vision and fun. We started a church called Against the Grain. And it was just a hard, trouble, tough, hurt season, but really exciting.
It's awesome.
And then I jumped into youth ministry after that fizzled out, and did 7 to 8 years of that. It feels like prison time. Did 7 to 8 years of that, and now, currently, I'm about 4 months out of youth ministry, and just asking God kind of like, what's next?
What's next?
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's such an amazing story. I think what's even And what I think is so awesome is how even throughout that time, everything that you were gonna be going through and everything that you went, God was still resourcing you that entire time. I think that's so good.
Yeah,
That's so good.
Some wild things happen. Like I seen a pastor in India that I went to school or church with.
Wow.
And he ended up being the one that helped us out with the church plant. Like there's just
That's
a lot
amazing.
of small things that happen throughout those seasons. Friends that donated a ton of money to get stuff going. I mean, the crazy part is we started in a smog shop.
Wow.
And we had like 150 people show up. Like
That's
it was
awesome.
wild. Like,
That's
and I'm like, I
amazing.
didn't even know half of them. I'm like, what happened? They're like, we just heard about this because of Chris, you know? And so, but yeah.
That's awesome. I think it's so cool too. And, you know, we're talking about, you know, we want to resource people on reaching. I think it's amazing how you accepted the calling first and God brought the people that you were going to reach to you. And that was he throughout this whole process and that whole time, he was equipping you and getting you ready for what was going to happen. I think that's amazing. Yeah, it's just awesome.
And I think if I could say anything to that, I think the ability just to say yes and not be prepared.
Yeah.
Or to say yes. Like, I hate to say it's like the fake it till you make it mentality, but it's like fake it and God will take care of it.
Yeah.
Right?
I think once you have that like heart posture of like, I'm willing to do what you want, and I don't really know what I'm doing, but God, that's all you. I know you got it. I think once even as leaders and like even as students, like once you have that mentality of like, I'm just here to be used by God, He's gonna take care of it.
I totally agree.
That's awesome.
And it ends up being, I mean, you learn a lot too through the way.
Oh yeah.
You learn a lot by failure, and you learn about by success, and you learn about yourself and all that stuff.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And one question I had for you is like for the youth pastor or for the youth leader that's trying to, we've resourced our students a lot, but we want to talk more about our youth leaders. Like, what is a piece of advice that you would give to a youth leader or a youth pastor that's maybe looking for leaders or maybe looking to reach a leader to start, putting them in that position?
So I'd spent some time at T-Mobile, spent some time doing youth ministry, and now we're spending time, my wife and I are building business right now. And the thing that I love, so I love building up next generation leaders. It's like my pastime. You could ask Marcus. Like he called me, just ask me about something, and it just like makes my day, right? Or other guys that are in ministry now. Like just, it's awesome. One of the things that I would suggest, or I'd even dig into, is you don't like, if you're looking for leaders, you do not have to be in control of everything. Right? I think as big L leaders, as Andy Stanley would say, right? Like big L leaders, they are ones that are not usually the smartest person in the room. I am not going to be spelling on social media.
Wow.
Let's just be honest. But I will find someone that can spell the crap out of life, right?
Wow,
And I will empower them and bolden them. And then two, great leaders need great vision. And I'm not just saying that you need to, like, they need to come up with great vision. They need to be drawn to great vision. So if you want great leaders, I had a friend, he's a friend now, but he owns a humongous elevator company, one of the biggest in the world in what he does. And he was serving on our youth team. I'm like, why are you serving on our youth team? His wife was a former lawyer. I'm like, why is she? We had a doctor. Why are they serving? They had big vision, and then I empowered them and said, I am not as smart as you. I can't even fake to do what you do, right? Like, you go ahead and do it. Yeah. So I would just say, if you give them the freedom, and in my younger youth pastor days, the freedom was really hard to give, because if it got away from me, or if they did stuff that I didn't know, or I felt less than. But as I started watching like real discipleship happen with students, that's when it almost switched, and I was like, I got to put my ego second, and I got to allow God to move here. Wow, that's awesome. And so as a leader, sometimes you could, or it could be fair. I don't know how to control. Don't control it. Just let it happen, and if it falls off the rails, just pick it up. Because guess what? The greatest thing about doing youth ministry is students forget really quick. Yeah. And if you care, that's all they care about. Wow. That's awesome. Right. And so that's amazing. That's what I've learned. Yeah. That's really, really good. So I don't know if that helps at all, and then for the leader, the main leader looking for other leaders, you can't be too busy for your leaders, right? If you're doing anything else, like I used to tell people, I still remember my youth leader. His name was Sonny Parks. He still talks to me to this day.
Wow.
They will, if you build up the right youth leader, they will be youth leaders for the rest of their life to the students that they shepherd throughout the season. I cannot shepherd that many students. I cannot have one-on-one relationships with that many students or personal relationships. The main leader cannot do that. But that one youth leader, and this is what I tell leaders, like volunteer leaders and stuff like that, you are a pastor of 5 to 10 kids or 5 to 12 kids, and that should be one of your life's works type of thing.
Wow.
I mean, from year one, I have one kid named Jared Vance. He was probably like my first real student. I love him to this day. He's working at Chick-fil-A in New York now, went through like a whole leadership program. We still talk.
Wow. That's awesome.
Like I got another leader telling me like he's not a youth leader anymore, but the class that he finished with, which were seniors 2 years ago, he still talks to one of the students once a week.
Wow.
And so I would just say like, man, they'll make them your kids, make them the thing that you pour into, because the return is not just for today. Our results and efforts will be seen in 10, 20 years from now. Like, who are our future leaders? We're building and sowing disciples. And so, and it takes time.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so good. Well, we don't have very much time left, but if you'd like to just pray over anybody that's watching, any leaders or any pastors that are, gaining insight and wisdom from this, if you'd just like to pray over them and we'd close out.
Yeah, totally. Oh, Lord, I just ask that that you bring plenty to where people say there are few. I ask that we see next generation leaders raised up through this podcast, through this team right here and right now, Lord. And I ask that that the future is even brighter than we can imagine, that we are involved in a movement of Gen Zers that is like nothing we've ever seen before, Lord. And it's because you called the saints to equip them at the right time. Lord, thank you for this moment and this time. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah.
You guys can find everything related to Pastor Derrick and any of the previous episodes in the description as well. You guys can subscribe and hit the notification bell so you guys can get notified for the next episode. But this is actually the last episode of this season, and so we're going to be getting everything set for this next one. And I'm super excited for it. So you guys are going to want to stay up to date for that as well. And so don't forget, it takes each one of us to reach the one. We'll see you guys next season.